Good morning, Chair Squilla, President Johnson, Councilmember Young, Councilmember Gautier. My name is Sheila Ireland, and I serve as the President and CEO of OIC Philadelphia. OIC was founded in North Philadelphia in 1964 by Reverend Dr. Leon Sullivan, at a time when many African Americans residents in the city were systematically excluded from employment opportunities. Dr. Sullivan first organized what became known as the selective patronage movement, challenging companies that benefited from African American communities' income but refused to hire from it. And after opening these doors, he'd offered a warning that still guides workforce policy today. Integration without preparation leads to frustration. So he created OIC, an institution designed to prepare people for real jobs in the real economy. And for more than 60 years, OIC Philadelphia has done exactly that. We take talent that the economy has overlooked and prepare it for jobs the economy needs. And today we train Philadelphians for careers in culinary, hospitality, digital media, information technology, and emerging green industries. And what we see every day tells us something important about workforce development in this city. Philadelphia does not have a shortage of people willing to work. What we have is a challenge of career pathways between talent and opportunity. Our economy now supports nearly 800,000 jobs, and sectors like healthcare, hospitality, and infrastructure continue to grow. But many residents remain disconnected from those opportunities because the system's thinking, linking training, employers, and supportive services is not always aligned. The individuals we serve at OIC are not looking for charity. They are looking for a fair chance to participate in the economy of their own city. Too often, workforce development becomes a collection of programs rather than a coordinated strategy to economic growth. And if we want workforce development to truly reduce poverty in Philadelphia, we need to focus on a few key priorities. One, align workforce training with employer demand. First, workforce training must be driven by employers. Programs are most successful when employers help design the curriculum, provide internship or experience or learning opportunities, and hire graduates. Training disconnected from hiring demand does not reduce poverty. Cities that succeed in workforce development treat it as a talent pipeline for growing industries, not simply a training service. Second, we should strengthen organizations that serve as intermediaries between employers and communities. Community-based organizations like OIC have decades of experience working in neighborhoods where traditional institutions often struggle to reach, i.e., our history, our legacy, and our 55,000 plus alumni give us a ground game that is the differentiator. We help translate employer needs into accessible pathways for residents. And when these intermediaries are strong, the entire workforce ecosystem works better. Third, we must address the barriers that prevent people from staying employed. In our experience, the biggest challenges are not always getting the first job. They're keeping the job. Transportation reliability, childcare access, health and family responsibilities all get in the way. Workforce policy must focus on retention and stability, not just job placement. Thanks to funding from the Commerce Department and the William Penn Foundation, later this year, OIC Philadelphia will launch our Workforce Support Hub, which leverages both our physical infrastructure, our partnerships, and our funding to change this game in Philadelphia. And finally, we should measure workforce success based on career mobility. Getting someone their first job matters. I can't say that enough. But what truly reduces poverty is wage growth and career progression over time. Our workforce system should track whether residents are moving from entry-level work into stable careers that support their families, or as we like to say at OIC, just bouncing around at the bottom. Workforce development is not a social service program. It's economic development. Businesses cannot grow without talent. Residents cannot prosper without access to opportunity. And Philadelphia's small businesses, which make up more than 90% of firms in our region, depend on our prepared workforce to compete and grow. So let me say this, Philadelphia has never lacked talent. What we have sometimes lacked is a clear pathway between talent and opportunity. Dr. Leon Sullivan understood that more than 60 years ago when he created OIC. He believed that when people are prepared and given a fair chance to work, they don't just change their lives. They strengthen their families, their neighborhoods, their communities in this city. And I believe that Philadelphia is serious about reducing poverty. Connecting residents to stable careers is not one strategy, it is the strategy. So let me leave you with a quick story. I've been at OIC now for a little over 3.5 years, and early on, I ran into a student who was a little bit out of sorts. And I asked, what's going on with you today? And he said to me, I haven't had a real meal today. And at that moment, we had a choice. We could focus narrowly on training, but you gotta recognize that we can't build a workforce pipeline on empty stomachs. So we made a decision. We removed vending machines that sold junk in our building and replaced them with something better, a commitment to food justice. Today, every student at OIC receives a free, healthy breakfast of their choice. Every applicant or program candidate who walks in the door is offered a meal. From that single decision, something bigger began to take shape. The same individual can now move through OIC's comprehensive ecosystem, from a meal to culinary training to hands-on experience in our Sullivan's Way Cafe, where food meets digital literacy and customer engagement, to a paid internship that expands from back-of-the-house skills in the culinary training program into operations and business management, to our student-led and run catering company, which provides experiential learning and a source of revenue for OIC, and to even launching their own businesses with support from Temple's SPDC. That is not just a program, it's an economic development pipeline. And that is what it looks like when workforce is designed, not just to place someone in a job, but to build a worker, a professional, and ultimately an owner. At OIC, we're not just preparing people for the economy, we're preparing them to participate in building in it. Or to paraphrase Jay-Z, who said it best, at OIC we say, you're not a businessman, you're a businessman. Thank you for the opportunity to testify today.
Thank you so much for your testimony. Councilman President Johnson.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Quoting Jay-Z.
First time in council.
Very, very fitting, because he shall be here soon. First, thank the two of you for your testimony. I'm big fans of both of your programs. The Skills Initiative, thank you for taking out the West Part, because it's more inclusive for everybody. Always wants to be supportive of it. And every time I see that West Part, I'm like, well. No, but on the real, it's very, very impressive program. I know about the program when Sheila Ireland was around in the early stages of putting the program together, and I always like that when we receive, one thing I know your program is very good at is getting the word out on social media. Because I always get something about somebody might want to become a nursing assistant or some type of high level though, right, career opportunity. I would get it on social media and I would pass it along. So from the Skills Initiative perspective, how do you go about establishing the actual partnerships that you have, and then also what are the barriers that you have seen that council could be supportive in trying to address when it comes to individuals becoming gainfully employed, or I like to say young people have an opportunity to follow a career path, right? Because we don't want young people to just have a job, but an actual career.
I think the main differentiator for the Skills Initiative has been the employer engagement prowess. The idea that we're acting like consultants, working with employers, as a professional services firm might to understand what their needs are, and then the training is customized. It's responsive to those needs. So we are assured, although people aren't guaranteed a job when they enter the program, they are receiving training that is so real to the job experience that employers are finding them qualified and then, hiring 93% of them. So I think that jobs first approach is very, very critical. The curriculum at the Skills Initiative is a professional development curriculum, and I stand by this. I think if any of us would go through a Skills Initiative class today, we would take something away of value. But the program treats our participants with respect, recognizing that this is professional development that anyone could benefit from. The program just gives them the time and space to focus on what they need, to hone the skills that they have, to deliver at a CHOP or a Penn Medicine or at an IOVANCE. So I think that approach to participant development is really important. And I will say that for us, one of the biggest barriers to continuing to connect folks to these high-quality jobs is the cost of certification programs. They are now a cost on us as an organization that we're happy to bear because they lead to higher, they lead to higher quality roles for folks, but it is a significant cost and something that we could be connecting folks to higher quality jobs with additional support. And Philadelphia Works does what they can, but it is something that we've identified as a distinct need, particularly for the healthcare careers and those that are going to be coming online at the Navy Yard.
Okay, awesome. Ms. Sheila Allen, I know the work that you've done, you've advised me on a variety of different initiatives and still continue to inspire me around this particular type of work. But something you talked about really, really stuck out, and you talked about making sure the employer is part of the design on how we come up with the strategy. Can you elaborate on that? Because oftentimes we come to the table and say, hey, this is what we think it should look like, but can you elaborate on that more, please?
Yeah, it's the difference between this idea of, I'll give you an example. Do you remember that moment in time where if we taught everyone coding, we would have no more unemployment issues, right? And that was not informed by who was hiring, what the job requirements were, what the dosage of workforce would be required for people to actually be successful in those programs, without really starting at the beginning, right? Which has been our strategy from the beginning, is you don't understand exactly what you're doing or why, and then you're trying to force an employer to take someone who does not meet their needs. Even, I'm not stealing thunder, but even back in the Skills Initiative days, when we did certified medical assistants, it is a different job at CHOP, it is a different job at Penn, it is a different job at Temple. And so without doing that kind of employer needs assessment, where you understand not just the skill set that is required, right, but the cultural and behavioral context for success in those organizations, you fail the people that you serve. And so when we say employer-driven, we mean, yes, we do understand what specific set of skills that you would like for them to be able to have, but will you fit here is just as important.
I know I did a Toria site, and I had like Pico there, and the young people were doing
The training academy.
the training academy, right? And so obviously, how many programs do your organization work with in terms of public-private partnerships for training? How many?
So the bigger ones are obviously the convention center. So they've been our partner for almost 35 years. PICO's been our partner for the last 9 years as well. There's a number of employer partners, Solar States, et cetera. Across every discipline, there are standing partnerships across the green jobs, healthcare, IT, et cetera.
Did you bring the thought process regarding the design approach with the employer to OIC, or that was something that was already they were doing prior to you coming?
No, there's a lot of what we call train and pray going on. Train and pray.
Training, pray?
Pray.
Oh, train and pray.
Pray.
Oh,
Right.
okay, gotcha.
Right, we train and we pray.
Yeah, understood.
That they get a job.
The faith without works is,
Yes. And I have to say OIC wasn't very different. When I entered into the door, I think there's a couple things that go on, I think, that drive it. right? One, you need the sophistication to be able to build bespoke curriculum to answer the employer's call. If you do not have that capacity or ability in-house, it's very difficult to shift to what the employer needs in some way. So you have to have a organization that understands instructional design, facilitation, how to build programming, as opposed to, one and done, right? So that, it's just like, you're a snappy dresser, President Johnson. It's just like, having a bespoke suit, right? It might be the same material, but it looks and it feels and operates very differently for you.
Yes.
And so it's a more difficult proposition, frankly.
Okay. All right. That's all I have at this moment, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Councilmember Gautier.
Good afternoon to both of you. It's a pleasure to see you. Congratulations on your new position, Sarah, and congrats to both of you on all your success. I think the West Philadelphia Skills Initiative will forever be my favorite workforce program. I think it's one of the best in the country. I will forever claim giving you guys your first grant when I was a program officer at LISC, and have been just so impressed by what you do. And Sheila, you were the architect of that, right, way back when. And so there's a lot of expertise at this table. I want to ask you, how can we share the critical learnings that both of you have experienced in your time in setting up successful workforce development initiatives, and how can we infuse them, among the rest of our programs here in the city of Philadelphia? And then secondly, I've struggled for a while to understand how we scale this model with more emerging industries. I know that the IOVANCE program, for example, is fantastic, but I have been really focused on how we, bottle this, particularly, I think we're in a moment in time with life sciences and biotech. I hope that it's going to come back, and I know that the core of that is in my district and the council president's district. How do we capitalize on what you've learned to take this to more emerging and growing industries?
Do you want me to go?
Yeah, sure.
I'll go. I'll start with the scale idea first. One of the more sobering statistics, I think, that we've seen in the business community, if you think about how corporate America used to invest in professional development or employee development, the thing that comes to mind is if you remember the company man from GM, right? So if you were lucky, you got in the GM training program and, you left before you died, but you stayed there 40 years and GM prepared you for subsequent ranks in there. We don't see that type of investment anymore in organizations, right? We don't see that type of corporate investment in it. I can't speak to how the Skills Initiative is funded now, but the majority of our funding does not come from corporate America. So we have a client with no skin in the game except what we can produce for them in some way. And for years, I think it's been enough, but that type of, if we are helping you build your business, is that not a viable function to pay for in some ways? And I think sometimes that kind of gap between corporate philanthropy and the work that they would like to be seen done in workforce is a gap. So.
Yeah, I think scale for us, we are committed to maintaining our outcomes. So if we grow too quickly, then those quality outcomes, we put them at risk. So we are growing every year. I would say that our path to growth involves these innovation hubs, these places where we have concentrated jobs, where we want to begin to work more and more, and then also industry partnerships. We've pulled together 2 industry partnerships, one in healthcare and one in life sciences. The idea being that employers are sharing their needs as a group, and then you can take what the Skills Initiative does, which right now is one employer, one training program, folks get jobs and learn about the needs of many employers at once, and hopefully be able to design programs at scale, shared curriculum, all the things that take this up a level. And you know, it's not just the skills initiative that should benefit from those industry partnerships. The idea is that we develop an understanding for what employers need using the skills that we have around employer engagement, but then we share those with other workforce providers so they are able to do more training and increase the number of folks who are connecting to jobs. We think that's part of our responsibility.
And Councilwoman, is the question scale or is it effectiveness? Yeah, see, we say scale a lot, right?
How do we scale this effective strategy? It's both.
Yeah. I always, you know, so part of why my remarks were focused on systems is that we do see failures. You know, you get on round one and you don't proceed. And, you know, one of the things that we are going to be testing out later this year is this idea how if, because we have the physical location and can do that, if we can bring the services that people need to them, right, can we effectively increase the stickiness of what we do, right? And so I would say, without the numbers in my head, that if we improved our outcomes 30%, like people were sticking, stayed, and moved, right? A lot of the issue that you're trying to address with scale would be addressed.
Thank you so much. And just a quick follow-up. Since you mentioned the industry partnership model as a way that we grow and get a better sense of what employers in emerging industries need, how's that going? How's the life sciences industry partnership going?
It's going well. I think you referenced the capital challenges in that environment, so we're feeling those. The needs of industry have shifted slightly, and they're now focused on, I think, executive leadership more than frontline workers. And that means we still see it as an economic development play. We're supporting them with career exposure for young people and still building a shared curriculum. But I would say that the hiring needs are not immediately there for life sciences at the scale that they were even 2 years ago for us. We continue to do programs, but not the same number of programs that we did previously.
Thank you. Thanks so much to both of you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councilmember. Chair recognizes Councilmember Young.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So when you both mentioned that the employers, having the employers design a program is very important. One of the most successful programs I've seen is at Community College of Philadelphia, where Toyota is teaching those students how to fix Toyotas. And then you get a job with Toyota as soon as you finish, right? So for a young person, you can say to them, when I finish this program, I got a job making $70 grand a year. So I think we have to, and that's it's a great example, but when we have like different competition for different industries in this, that, you know, in our area, particularly for the biopharmaceutical industry, like how can we, they may have different processes and techniques, but how can we, like in general, just train how can we use those, you know, competitive companies to help us with a shared curriculum, essentially, is what the question I'm getting at. Because yes, they all have an advantage of, they want to be able to train their people to do their stuff, but there's a need industry-wide for people in our city. So how can we, like what incentives can we provide them to help you all with that shared curriculum?
They're in. I don't think we need to take additional steps to incentivize them to participate. That is one of the core priorities of an industry partnership. The idea that more people can go through training that's been vetted by these employers when they are ready to hire folks at a higher scale. So I think that, you know, there's still, the devil's in the details, right? But the agreement is that we would partner with some of the community colleges to develop a shared curriculum specifically for biomanufacturing.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, I mean, CCP's already doing it. They're already doing manufacturing there. You know, it'll be a great place to park some of these industry-specific curriculum. So, however we can be supportive of that, I think that my colleagues and I would really love those programs because they actually work. Another question I have, Ms. Ireland, I just went to a graduation for some of your students with the computer programming with Perscalis. That, you know, those folks already had jobs. A lot of them had jobs before the program was even over, because that's a skill set that that's just a need. So how can we, as a city, begin to help you all identify those types of jobs where there's such a demand that, you know, once you get that skill, once you get that programming, the job opportunities are going to be particularly endless. So what are those industries you're seeing now, like outside of, I mean, of course, it's in the tech industry, right? Those folks have jobs. But what other emergency industries should we as a council be paying attention to get our young people prepared for that?
Yeah. I mean, I think you're aware of a lot of it. Maritime, obviously, is a huge opportunity for Philadelphia as well. Advanced manufacturing is something that is returning to the city that we would love to see more of here. We are always talking about skilled trades. We've been talking about skilled trades forever. But regardless of the union conversation, it is still the most in-demand skill needed globally. Not just Philadelphia, not just Pennsylvania, not just America, globally. And so when we have those opportunities to expand pathways into those industries, your help would be greatly appreciated.
Yeah, I think, you know, I'm looking here at, and Pew is going to testify, I'm looking at their data that says that, you know, in these middle wage jobs in Philadelphia, only 7% of black people are in construction, right? So, like, how, you know, that's a whole different conversation, but if this is a city of majority minority city, you know, only 7% of the population is involved in a particular industry, you know, how do we expect to really grow our city with those type of numbers? So well, thank you for that.
And I would add, we see tremendous opportunity in healthcare. I think that we take healthcare for granted sometimes in this city, but really the variety of roles available in healthcare and the clear career pathways that exist are a really solid entry point for a workforce development organization that's seeking to connect residents to jobs. That has been our bread and butter for a long time. We could do that full time. That is how heavy the demand is. It could just be healthcare for 2 major employers, and that could be all the skills initiative was, because that's how significant the demand is.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for the questions. Well, Councilmember Gilmore Richardson.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. And I had to quickly say thank you to the both of you. Sheila Ireland, early in my career, you have been such an expert in this work, and I appreciate all the work that you have done, not only to help us as a council, but to help me as a member of council who decided to focus on workforce development. And Sarah, we worked together for a very long time. Councilmember Gautier talked about you all bottling up this expertise to help others in the industry prepare folks for opportunities in a variety of industries, right, in healthcare and in other areas. And I was actually just at one of the Pew briefings, and Rashawn and I were talking about the skills initiative. I mentioned it while we were speaking because you all do such a wonderful job with high placement rates around career opportunities with high wages. Obviously the work in West Philadelphia, but with the expansion of the work as well. So if you all could just share data on the demographics of your participants, how you find your participants, and how you achieve such high placement rates. And I think it's important, I think Sheila pointed this out, that when you create a program, you have to have an end user. We talked about always having an end user at the Pew briefing. And so if you could just speak to how you all are able to achieve such high rates of participation and thus high rates of employment and wages at the end of the opportunity. And then Sheila, if you could talk about any lessons you've learned over your time working in this field that you can share with us about programs that are created and how you create lasting impact.
I can start with the participant demographics for the Skills Initiative. Now, since the expansion, we do have folks from every corner of the city who are participating in the Skills Initiative, but because of our home base, about half of our lifetime participants are from West Philadelphia. They've ranged in age from 18 the whole way up to 70, but the average age for us is around 32 years of age. It is more likely that people who identify as women will be moving through the Skills Initiative program. 65% of our participants are women, and somewhere in the range of 4% hold bachelor's degrees. And I mention that because I think that the Skills Initiative occupies a very particular niche, people who are close to connecting to that employment opportunity but need the access and the additional professional development. But that doesn't mean that everybody who moves through the Skills Initiative has a bachelor's degree. We are training Philadelphians with GEDs, high school equivalencies, to move through the program. In terms of the outcomes, I think you're going to hear the same thing from Sheila that you're going to hear from me, and I'm going to come back to employer engagement, employer engagement, employer engagement. It's a demand-driven model, and then you customize according to those needs to make these folks indispensable to the workplaces that they're eventually going to enter. I also think, and I know this butts up against scale, but I think that the high-touch nature of our program is part of the reason for its success, and it was designed that way from the beginning, and it continues to be. So meaning that folks are very much in touch with staff, getting the support they need for some of the barriers that were named in the earlier panel and today. So I think those are probably the two primary things. And given the opportunity, I would say that employer engagement is the thing that I identify, probably Sheila identifies as the most important thing. It is the most impossible thing to get funded, either from a philanthropic perspective or from a public dollars perspective. No one is paying for the 6 months that it takes to truly understand a workplace and to cultivate an employer. And I think, Councilmember Gautier asked, well, why aren't these practices more widely used? And it's because we had a lot of flexible funding at the beginning of the Skills Initiative that allowed us to do employer engagement. But for other organizations that might want to move in this direction in time, their financial models might not sustain it. So I think that's something worth mentioning.
And I'll add to Sarah's glory here. I will say in the beginning of the Skills Initiative, we took no public funding because there was not enough flexibility to enact the strategy that we wanted to do. People didn't want to fund stipends and didn't want to fund various aspects of the program. But once we honed in and said, this is what works, we had to raise dollars separate and distinct from revenue streams that might be more lucrative for us to be able to do that. Would you say that's fair?
Yeah, I think that's fair. And when I was the executive director, we introduced public funding with the support of Philadelphia Works to support the cost of credentials, which is one of the lanes that PAT's funding does allow for. So braiding that funding has let us go farther.
So lessons learned, they are myriad, right? I guess, so my testimony today was focused on systems because that's where, the journey has taken me to this particular point in time. We, I think, understand intimately workforce and how to get people, into work. That's no question around it. But after I landed at OIC in North Philadelphia, I'm trying to figure out how am I changing the trajectory of a community? And that is bigger than just getting a job, right? It's around activating what I think of as the 3 hubs of OIC, which is workforce development at its core, but we're also a social justice and economic empowerment engine. And so a lot of the work that you will see coming out of OIC, and this year in particular, is around economic empowerment and opportunity, leveraging our physical infrastructure to be able to provide service in different ways, aggregating the 6 Sullivan entities on North Broad Street for collective action, and the ability to give voice to the community that we serve. All of those things change the horizon that people see around what's possible for them. I wanted it to be a broader vision than just, I got a job here, right? But what can you do? How can you change the trajectory of Philadelphia and leverage the specific tools that are required to move families forward? I think that's what we're trying to explore and understand and lever right now, right? With still, workforce is always going to be the core of what we do. We're very proud of the work that's been done over the next 60 years. But what's the next step? What's the next evolution? Because if it was enough to just get a job, we still wouldn't be on the top 10 list for poverty 5 years later.
Thank you so much, and thank you for your testimony, much appreciated.